After Expedition Zero and the subsequent search and rescue missions, the voyages from Lumiere to the mainland halted for over a decade, at last resuming with Expedition 84, when the population firmly understood the severity of the Gommage, losing the eldest among them every time the Paintress lowered the number on the monolith by 1. Determined to discover the mystery behind the Gommage and defeat the Paintress, who they believed was responsible for these deaths, the yearly expeditions were often slaughtered by Painted Renoir, who sought to protect his wife and creator, or else battled past Nevrons and other dangers, full well knowing it would likely end in their demise. Yet the people of Lumiere lived by the sayings that when one falls, we continue, and tomorrow comes, as they believed it their duty to push the mission forward as much as possible, blazing trails, writing journals, and leaving behind anything that might help the next expedition advance further toward the monolith and Paintress. Though each of these expeditions met tragic fates, with some slaughtered, losing their minds, falling to infighting, or abandoning the mission to live out their lives on the continent, others greatly contributed as best they could, like Expedition 70, which installed grappling points to move up and down great distances, and Expedition 69, which installed climbing grips to scale mountainsides or steep regions. And then there was the legendary Expedition 60, which rigorously trained their bodies for years to reach peak physical form, becoming so agile, powerful, and muscular they traveled to the continent naked and used brute force to reach the monolith, charge through the barrier, and confront the Paintress, only to discover she was not the true enemy, and so they marched beneath the monolith to battle Renoir, while sending a messenger to swim across the ocean and warn the people of Lumiere. Yet the expeditioners ultimately could not defeat Renoir, and the 59-year-old messenger ran out of time, as the Gommage took his life only one swim from their homeland. During Expedition 58, Painted Verso started working against Painted Renoir, helping the expeditioners accomplish their goal of defeating the Paintress, as he wanted to save her life by sending her back to the real world, even if it meant the end of their reality and his own life. With Painted Verso's help, Expedition 58 made it to Old Lumiere on the continent, but ultimately failed in their mission. Around the time of Expedition 49, Rio Clea had enough of this canvas world and left the painting in order to continue her war against the writers. However, she also tasked Real Alysia to enter the painting in her stead and help their father defeat and rescue their mother. Once inside, Alysia was overwhelmed by her mother's chroma and repainted, born to parents in Lumiere, forgetting her true identity to live out her life as a girl named Maëlle. Concerned for her sister, Clea temporarily remained in the canvas and asked Painted Verso to watch over Alysia and keep her safe. Born to loving but older parents who lost their lives to the Gommage a few years later, Maëlle was left an orphan, passed around from family to family until adopted by Gustave and his sister Emma. Although Maëlle loved her adopted parents dearly, she always felt disconnected from the people of Lumiere, and so at the age of 16, joined Gustave for Expedition 33, composed primarily of 32-year-olds, who chose to spend their final year trying to defeat the Paintress, rather than waiting for the Gommage. Yet after so many failed expeditions, the people of Lumiere had lost hope and grew jaded, meaning few volunteered for the continuing mission. Nevertheless, thanks to the inventor Gustave, Expedition 33 had an edge, armed with Lumina converters, which converted Pictos to Lumina, providing passive skills that made them better fighters and survivors. And so, shortly after the most recent Gommage, in which Gustave lost Sophie, the woman he loved, Expedition 33 set off for the continent and landed on the Dark Shores, where they were almost immediately massacred by Painted Renoir. One of the only survivors, Gustave found himself alone and surrounded by dead friends and colleagues, so devastated he would have taken his own life if not for another survivor, Lune, who arrived at the last moment and convinced him to press forward with the mission. Lune was possibly the most level-headed and determined expeditioner among them, as she was the daughter of prominent researchers who dedicated her whole life to unraveling the mystery of the Paintress and Gommage. Traveling to the rallying point, they found another survivor, Leo, but he was soon killed by a tall Nevron, which they managed to defeat. After the battle, they found a message revealing Mael was alive, along with instructions which led them to Dysandra Manor, where they found her kept safe by the Curator, who then joined them in their journey, upgrading their weapons, lumina, and elixirs. Yet what none of them knew was that Mael was saved from the beach by Painted Verso, and the Curator was actually an avatar for real Renoir, who wanted them to succeed in defeating his wife, so he could complete his destruction of their world. Reunited, the three expeditioners found their way to a village populated by friendly Gestrels, where they found Ciel, another survivor who years earlier lost her husband in an accident which led her to try and take her own life. Though she survived, she later found out she had been pregnant and lost the baby. Moving forward, they picked up yet another companion when they met Eskier, a large, friendly creature who carried them as he swam or flew, helping them get closer to the monolith. Throughout the journey, Mael was plagued with visions and dreams, regularly seeing Painted Renoir and Painted Alysia, but could not understand why. Although disturbed by what she saw, Mael grew more concerned with retribution when her adopted father Gustave was killed by Painted Renoir, prompting Painted Verso to arrive moments later and send his father away, joining the expedition for the rest of their journey. While Painted Verso could have saved Gustave, he purposely let him die, fearing that once Mael learned the truth of the Paintress, she might not be willing to help defeat her, as it would mean the destruction of the canvas, and death of Gustave, with whom she was so close. Verso then helped the expedition recruit the Gestrels, Minoko, and his son Noko, only for Noko to die during another encounter with Painted Renoir. Unable to get the Paintress' heart, which would have helped them reach the monolith, the crew instead defeated the Axons Visages and Serene, extracting their chroma so the Curator could make them a weapon to take down the barrier and make their way to the Paintress. Yet before they could reach her, they fought a final battle against Painted Renoir, and with the help of the Curator, erased him from existence. Finally reaching the top of the monolith, the last survivors of Expedition 33 defeated the Paintress and returned to Lumiere as heroes, celebrating their victory while Painted Verso went off by himself and read a letter written by Painted Alysia and meant for Mael. This letter revealed the truth of their situation, how Mael was the real Alysia, and how the Paintress was actually protecting their world from her husband, real Renoir, who was responsible for the gommage. Throwing the letter in the ocean, Painted Verso completed his betrayal of the expeditioners and awaited the end of the world, brought on by the real Renoir, who was no longer restrained by his wife, and so sent a final gommage that erased all the people of Lumiere, save for Painted Verso and Mael, whose memories as Alysia returned. Locating real Renoir, Alysia begged him not to destroy this canvas world, as she had grown attached to the population of Lumiere and wanted them back, but her father refused and departed, as he knew leaving the canvas intact meant either Aline, Alysia, or both would remain inside, risking their lives on the outside. Unable to let this world go, Alysia used her developing Paintress skills to restore Lune and Ciel, while creating an army of Chroma warriors to help her track down her father and fight a final battle, defeating him with the help of her mother Aline, who had returned to the canvas. Promising not to lose herself inside this world, Renoir at last relented and left with his wife to the real world, giving Alysia full control over the chroma of the painting. Yet before she could bring back the population, Painted Verso objected, confronting her within the core of this reality, where the last remnant of Verso's soul, represented by a shadowy child, unhappily painted to keep the canvas alive. Although Mael/Alysia wanted to repaint the world and restore all the people she loved, Painted Verso believed this was all an unhealthy illusion, and Alysia would lose her mind and remain in the canvas until she died. He had enough of the painters using their grief as an excuse to play as gods over a fictional world, and wanted it all to end, no longer desiring to live this life so the soul of real Verso could rest. He also believed the family must exit the canvas and mourn their loss in the real world so they could finally move on with their lives. At an impasse, Alysia and Painted Verso engaged in a final battle for the fate of the canvas, fighting for a life to love or a life to paint. Should Verso win, everything in the world, including himself, Ciel, Lune, Eskie, and Minoko would perish, but real Alysia, Renoir, Aline, and Clair would be set free of this prison, able to mourn Verso properly in the real world, before healing the rift in their family and moving on together. Whereas, if Alysia won, the population of Lumiere would be restored, including Gustave, Sophie, and all the others, allowing them to thrive without the Gamage, protected by a new paintress who would likely never leave the canvas. Yet, this also meant the real Desandra family would remain divided, with Renoir, Aline, and Clair forced to mourn not only the loss of Verso, but also Alysia, who would likely be lost to them forever. And while Alysia would nurture the child version of Verso, representing the part of his soul in the canvas, painted Verso would be forced to continue living a life he did not want, forced to feign happiness and play his music at the command of Alysia, who would not let him go. A special thanks to all those who contribute to Civilization X, like Pete J. King, Daedry Dragonswit, Delacruz the Freed, and Barian the Soft Bastard Beesbury. If you'd like to help the channel, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and click on the links below, or else go to patreon.com/civilizationx, where you can gain early access to videos and watch the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.